Admiral Kethavar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Eternal Dominion. He looked out at the stars through the large viewing screen and felt proud. Around his ship, 46 other warships moved in perfect formation. This was the Third Fleet of the Zephyrian Hegemony, the most powerful military force in this part of space. The admiral was tall, even for a Zephyrian. His blue skin showed the darker patterns that marked him as nobility. His 4 arms moved smoothly as he checked different control panels. Each of his ships was a marvel of Zephyrian technology. They had weapons that could destroy planets and shields that had never been broken. "Sir," called out Commander Veltar from the sensor station, "we are detecting something strange ahead." Kithvar turned his large eyes toward his second-in-command. "What kind of strange?" "There is a ship, sir. It appears to be drifting without power. The design is unusual." The admiral walked over to look at the sensor readings. On the screen, he could see a shape that looked different from any ship he knew. It was smaller than even their smallest destroyer, maybe 800 meters long. The hull looked old and battered. "Can you identify the species?" Kethavar asked. Veltar worked at his controls for several minutes. His face showed confusion. "Sir, the computer says this might be a human ship." Several officers on the bridge made sounds of surprise. Kethavar felt his hearts beat faster. Humans were supposed to be dead. The hegemony had made sure of that over 200 years ago. "That is impossible," Kethavar said. "We destroyed their homeworld. We hunted down their colonies. There are no humans left." "The computer is very sure, sir. The hull design matches old human patterns from our historical records." Kethavar stared at the image on the screen. Humans had been a problem long ago. They were aggressive and refused to accept Zephyrian rule. They fought hard, even when they were clearly going to lose. The hegemony had been forced to completely destroy them to bring peace to this region of space. "Perhaps it is just an old derelict," suggested Veltar. "It could have been drifting here since the war." The admiral nodded slowly. That made sense. Space was big, and old ships could drift for centuries without being found. Still, finding any trace of humanity was exciting. The scholars back home would pay well for human artifacts. "Order the fleet to surround the vessel," Kethavar commanded. "Maintain a safe distance, but do not let it escape if it somehow has power." The 47 ships of the Third Fleet moved into position around the strange human ship. It looked tiny, surrounded by so much firepower. Kethavar's ship alone had enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Together, his fleet could crack a planet in half. "Sir, we are getting some odd readings," Veltar reported. "The ship's power signature is strange." "Strange how?" "It keeps changing. One moment it reads as completely dead. The next moment our sensors cannot get a proper reading." Kethavar frowned. Sensor errors were rare with Zephyrian technology. Their equipment was the best in the galaxy. "Perhaps the old human systems are interfering with our scans," he said. "It does not matter. Even if that ship has weapons, what could one small vessel do against our entire fleet?" The bridge crew laughed at this. It was true. The human ship was so small that many of their destroyers could ram it and barely notice the impact. Even if it had working weapons, human technology had always been inferior to Zephyrian designs. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "should we try to contact the vessel?" Kethavar thought about this. Standard procedure was to hail unknown ships. But this was supposed to be a dead species. There should be no one alive on that ship to answer. "Try standard frequencies," he decided. If there is anyone alive in there, they might have useful information about human technology. The communications officer worked at her station. After a few minutes, she shook her head. "No response, sir. The ship appears to be completely dead." "Very well. Order a boarding party to prepare. We will take that ship and examine it properly." As the crew prepared for the boarding operation, Kethavar looked at the human ship again. It really did look ancient and damaged. The hull had burning marks and dents that suggested it had been in many battles. Some sections looked like they had been repaired with different materials. "Sir," Veltar said quietly, moving closer to the admiral, "do you think this could be some kind of trap?" Kethavar laughed. "A trap? Commander, look at our fleet. We have 47 warships. Even if that vessel was fully operational and filled with their best warriors, what could they possibly do to us? It was a good point. The Zephyrian Third Fleet was one of the most powerful forces in known space. They had fought and defeated dozens of other species. Their weapons were powered by captured stars. Their shields could stop any known attack. You are right, sir. Veltar agreed. I suppose I am just nervous about finding humans again. The history books say they were very tricky in battle. That was long ago, Kethvar said, and they still lost in the end. Whatever tricks they had, it was not enough to save them. The boarding shuttles were almost ready when the sensor officer called out again. Sir, the human ship is showing some kind of energy buildup. Kethvar turned quickly. What kind of buildup? I am not sure, sir. The readings are unlike anything I have seen before. It is as if the ship is waking up. On the viewing screen, they could see the human vessel more clearly now. Parts of its hull were starting to glow with a soft blue light. Sections that had looked like battle damage were shifting and changing. Sir, the weapons officer said, his voice worried. I am detecting weapon ports opening on the human ship. Kethvar felt a chill run through his body. Weapon ports meant the ship was not as dead as it appeared, but he quickly pushed his fear away. Even if the humans had weapons, they were still just one small ship. All ships, raise shields and charge weapons, he ordered. If the humans want to fight, we will show them why their species is extinct. The massive Zephyrian warships powered up their weapon systems. Energy readings spiked across the fleet as they prepared for battle. 47 ships against one small human vessel. The outcome was obvious. Sir, we are receiving a transmission, the communications officer announced. From the human ship? Yes, sir. They are broadcasting on all frequencies. Kethvar straightened his uniform and prepared to face his ancient enemy. After more than 2 centuries, humanity and the Zephyrian hegemony would meet again. He was confident. This meeting would end the same way as all the others. Put it on the main screen, he commanded. The viewing screen flickered and then showed the bridge of the human ship. Kethvar was surprised to see that it looked clean and modern, not old and damaged like the outside. A human female sat in the captain's chair. She had dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to look right through him. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution, the human said in perfect Zephyrian language. You are in violation of Terran space. Withdraw immediately. The bridge fell silent. Then slowly Kethvar began to laugh. Admiral Kethvar laughed so hard that tears formed in his large eyes. Around the bridge, his officers joined in the laughter. The idea was simply too funny. One small human ship telling the mighty Third Fleet to withdraw. Terran space? Kethvar said when he could speak again. Human, there is no such thing as Terran space anymore. Your species is extinct. We made sure of that over 200 years ago. Captain Chen's face did not change. She sat calmly in her chair, watching him with those strange human eyes. Her expression reminded Kethvar of a predator watching prey, which was ridiculous. Humans were weak creatures. They had no claws, no natural armor, and they could barely survive on most worlds without special equipment. You seem to have incomplete information, Chen said. Her voice was steady and cold. Humanity survived. We adapted. We evolved. Evolved? Kethvar laughed again. Into what? You are still the same weak species we defeated before. Look around you, human. You have one small ship. I have 47 warships, each one larger and more powerful than your entire vessel. The human captain tilted her head slightly as if considering his words. Size is not always an advantage, Admiral. Sometimes being small means being underestimated. Commander Veltar leaned close to Kethvar. Sir, our sensors are still getting strange readings from their ship. The power levels keep changing in ways that should not be possible. Kethvar waved him away. Sensor glitches were common around old ships. The important thing was that they had found a living human. The scientists back home would be very interested in studying her. I will make you an offer, Captain Chen, Kethvar said. Surrender your ship peacefully, and I will make sure you are treated well. You can live the rest of your life in comfort, helping us understand human technology and culture. That is very generous, Chen replied. But I have a better offer for you. Leave the system now and some of your crew might survive to warn others. The bridge fell silent again. Then the laughter returned, even louder than before. The weapons officer was laughing so hard he had to hold on to his console to stay upright. Warn others about what? Kethavar asked. About one old human ship? About what humanity has become, Chen said simply. On the sensor screens, the human ship was still changing. More sections of the hull were glowing now, and the weapon ports were fully open, but even with weapons, it was still just one small ship against an entire fleet. Sir, the communications officer said. Should I cut the transmission? Kethavar thought about it. Part of him wanted to keep talking to the human. It was fascinating to meet a member of a species everyone thought was dead. But he also had a job to do. Captain Chen, he said, you have exactly 1 minute to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you refuse, I will destroy your ship and end humanity once and for all. You already tried to end humanity once, Chen replied. It did not work out as planned. The Admiral's good mood was starting to fade. This human was either very brave or very stupid. Either way, she was beginning to annoy him. 1 minute, he repeated. Chen nodded slowly. 30 seconds, she said. What? You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. After that, we will consider you a hostile force and respond accordingly. Kethavar stared at her in disbelief. Was this human actually threatening him with what? Her tiny ship could not possibly damage even one of his destroyers, let alone his entire fleet. You are insane, he said. Perhaps, Chen agreed. Exile has a way of changing perspective. Sir, Veltar whispered urgently. The energy readings from their ship just increased by a factor of 10. Our sensors cannot properly measure their power output anymore. Kethavar looked at the sensor displays. The numbers were jumping around wildly, showing readings that made no sense. One moment the human ship appeared to have no power at all. The next moment the sensors showed energy levels that were impossible. Sensor malfunction, he decided. Their old technology is interfering with our equipment. Sir, all our sensors are showing the same impossible readings. And the interference is getting stronger. On the viewing screen, Captain Chen checked something on her own console. 20 seconds, she announced. Kethavar felt his anger growing. No one threatened the Zephyrian hegemony, especially not a single human in an old ship. He had been patient enough. All ships target the human vessel, he commanded. Prepare to fire on my order. 47 warships turned their weapons toward the small human ship. The amount of firepower now aimed at Chen's vessel was enormous. Plasma cannons that could melt through solid rock. Gravitic torpedoes that could tear apart the molecular bonds in any material. Energy beams that could cut through the hulls of other warships like they were made of paper. 10 seconds, Chen said calmly. Sir, we should fire now, urged the weapons officer. Before they can do whatever they are planning. Kethavar almost gave the order. But something made him wait. Maybe it was curiosity about what the human thought she could do. Maybe it was the strange sensor readings that his crew could not explain. Or maybe it was the way Captain Chen sat so calmly as if she knew something he did not. 5 seconds, Chen announced. The bridge was completely quiet now. Everyone was watching the countdown, waiting to see what would happen when it reached 0. Kethavar gripped the armrests of his command chair. His finger hovered over the firing button. 3, 2, 1. Chen looked directly at him through the screen. Time's up, Admiral. You made your choice. For a moment, nothing happened. The human ship continued to float in space, surrounded by the massive Zephyrian fleet. Then slowly more sections of the hull began to glow. The light was getting brighter, changing from blue to white to something beyond the visible spectrum. Sir, the sensor officer called out, his voice filled with panic. Their power readings just went completely off our scales. The computer says it's impossible. What is impossible? The energy output, sir. According to our sensors, that ship is now producing more power than a small star. Kethavar looked at the human ship again. It did not look any different except for the strange glow. It was still the same small vessel they had found drifting in space. That cannot be right, he said. Sir, recommend we fire immediately, Veltar said. Whatever they are doing, we should stop it now. Kethavar nodded. He had waited long enough. All ships fire at will. Destroy that vessel. But before he could give the final order, Captain Chen spoke again. I tried to warn you, she said quietly. Remember that. Admiral Kethavar slammed his fist down on the firing control. All ships open fire. Destroy them! The Eternal Dominion's massive weapons came alive. Plasma cannons charged with the power of captured stars fired brilliant beams of destruction. Gravitic torpedoes launched from every tube, their warheads designed to tear apart matter at the atomic level. Energy weapons that could slice through moon-sized asteroids all focused on the small human ship. The other 46 ships of the fleet fired as well. The space around the human vessel filled with deadly light. Enough firepower to crack open a planet rushed toward the tiny ship called Retribution. Kethvar watched with satisfaction. No ship could survive such an attack. The weapons reached the human vessel and simply disappeared, not deflected, not absorbed. They just stopped existing 10 meters away from the ship's hull. The massive plasma beams that should have melted through any armor vanished like they had never been fired. The gravitic torpedoes that could destroy city-sized targets simply ceased to be. What just happened? Kethvar demanded. Sir, our weapons just stopped. The weapons officer reported, his voice shaking. All sensors show they were completely destroyed before reaching the target. Destroyed by what? Their shields? Sir, we are not detecting any shields around their ship. The weapons just disappeared. Kethvar stared at the viewing screen. The human ship sat unchanged in space, not a single mark on its hull. It was as if the most powerful fleet in this sector had never fired at all. Impossible, he whispered. Then the human ship responded. A thin beam of silver light reached out from the Retribution. It was barely visible, no thicker than a finger. Compared to the massive weapons his fleet had just fired, it looked like nothing. It touched the hull of the Eternal Dominion. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The great dreadnought began to change. The molecular structure of its hull started to break apart, but not in any way Kethvar had ever seen. The metal did not melt or explode. Instead, it transformed into something that looked like dancing lights. Beautiful streams of color spread across the ship's surface. Sir, we need to evacuate, Commander Veltar shouted. The hull is failing. But there was no time. The transformation was spreading too fast. Kethvar felt a strange warmth wash over him as the bridge around him began to glow. He realized in his final moment that he was not dying in pain. The change was gentle, almost peaceful. His last thought was wonder at how beautiful it was to become part of the light. The Eternal Dominion, all 3 kilometers of it, dissolved into a spectacular aurora that spread across space before fading into nothing. 3,000 Zephyrian lives ended in an instant, their atoms scattered harmlessly into the cosmic background. The remaining 46 ships of the fleet stared in horror at where their flagship had been. Nothing remained except empty space and the memory of impossible light. All ships retreat immediately, Admiral Hector of the Crimson Blade shouted over the fleet communications. As the second-ranking officer, command had fallen to him. Emergency jump now. But their ships would not respond properly. Engines that had worked perfectly for decades suddenly struggled to build power. Jump drives that could fold space itself began to fail. Sir, we cannot achieve jump velocity, his helmsman reported. It's as if space itself has become thicker around us. Captain Chen's voice came over all frequencies again. Her tone was calm, almost sad. Running will not help you now. Your ships are caught in a reality anchor. You cannot escape. What do you want? Admiral Hector demanded. I want you to understand, Chen replied. For 200 years we drifted between the stars. We watched our children die in cold ships. We saw our elders fade away in the darkness between worlds, and we learned. The human ship began to move toward the fleet. It did not use any visible engines. Space itself seemed to bend around it, carrying it forward without any sign of propulsion. We learned that the universe is not what your scientists believe, Chen continued. Matter and energy are just the surface of something much deeper. We learned to touch that deeper reality. We learned to change it. 2 more ships were touched by silver light. The destroyer Voidrender simply vanished, erased from existence as if it had never been built. The cruiser Star's edge was transformed into a geometric pattern of crystallized time that would hang in space forever, its crew preserved in a single moment. Stop this, Hector begged. We surrender. Do you? Chen asked. Will you surrender your weapons? Will you release the species you have enslaved? Will you return the worlds you have stolen? The Admiral was quiet. Everyone knew the hegemony would never agree to such terms. Their entire empire was built on conquest and control. I thought not, Chen said sadly. More ships died. Some were simply deleted from reality. Others were changed in ways that hurt to look at. The battlecruiser Iron Fist was turned inside out through dimensions that should not exist. Its crew found themselves floating in space but somehow still alive and breathing, watching their ship transform into impossible shapes. "Please," Hector whispered. "We have families, children." "So did we," Chen replied. "So did every species you destroyed. So did every world you burned." The slaughter continued with terrible efficiency. Each ship that was touched by the silver light met a different fate. Some exploded into clouds of exotic particles. Others were compressed into perfect spheres the size of marbles. A few lucky vessels simply had their crews transported into space, giving them a few minutes to send final messages before their life support ran out. Through it all, the human ship moved like a ghost. It ignored every physical law the Zephyrians understood. It flew without engines, fired without weapons, and destroyed without explosions. It was as if the universe itself was helping it kill. "How?" Hector asked as his own ship's turn approached. "How did you become this?" Chen's image appeared on his screen. For the first time, she showed emotion. Her eyes were sad, ancient in a way that spoke of unimaginable suffering. "We had no choice," she said. "You drove us beyond the edge of known space. You thought you had killed us all, but some survived. We drifted in the void between galaxies for 2 centuries, and in that darkness we found something." "Found what?" "The foundation code of reality itself, the rules that govern how the universe works, and we learned to rewrite them." Hector's ship, the Crimson Blade, was the last one left. Around him, his crew waited for death. They had seen what happened to the other ships. They knew there was no escape. "We are not the same species you destroyed," Chen said. "We are something new. Something you created by driving us to the very edge of extinction. We are what happens when a species has nothing left to lose except its humanity." The silver light reached out toward the Crimson Blade. "And we have not forgotten our humanity," Chen added. "That is what makes us dangerous." The silver light from the human ship reached toward the Crimson Blade, but stopped just short of touching the hull. Admiral Hector held his breath, waiting for death or transformation or whatever impossible fate the humans had chosen for him. "You will be the messenger," Captain Chen said through the communications system. "You will carry word back to your people about what you have witnessed here." Hector felt relief and terror at the same time. He would live, but he would have to explain how the entire Third Fleet had been destroyed by a single human ship. No one would believe him. "Why spare me?" he asked. "Because someone needs to tell your leaders what humanity has become," Chen replied. "Someone needs to warn them about what is coming." The human ship moved closer to the Crimson Blade. Hector could see it clearly now through the viewing ports. The vessel looked ancient and battle-damaged from the outside, but something was wrong with the way it moved. It did not obey the normal rules of physics. It drifted through space like a ghost, leaving no engine trails, creating no gravitational disturbances. "Your sensors cannot properly read our ship," Chen explained, as if she could hear his thoughts. "That is because it exists in multiple dimensions at once. What you see is only a shadow of what we really are." "What are you really?" Hector whispered. "We are what you made us. When you destroyed our worlds, you thought you were ending a threat. Instead, you created something far more dangerous. You forced us to evolve beyond the limitations of normal matter and energy." On his sensor screens, Hector could see the debris field where the Third Fleet had been destroyed. Except there was no debris. No wreckage floating in space. No bodies or escape pods. The 46 ships had not just been destroyed. They had been completely removed from existence. "How many of you are there?" he asked. "Enough," Chen answered. "We built our new ships in the void between galaxies. We had time to think, to plan, to become something your people could never imagine. 200 years is a long time to prepare for revenge. This is revenge?" "No," Chen said, and her voice became colder. "This is just the beginning. Revenge would be quick. What we plan will take much longer." The human ship began to change again. Sections of the hull that had looked solid became transparent. Through the clear areas, Hector could see impossible things. Rooms that were bigger inside than outside. Corridors that curved through dimensions that should not exist. Crew members who looked human but moved in ways that hurt to watch. "We offered your admiral a chance to withdraw," Chen continued. "He chose to fight instead. That choice has consequences. Not just for him, but for your entire empire." "What consequences?" "Your people will learn what it means to face an enemy that cannot be defeated by normal weapons, cannot be stopped by normal defenses, cannot be understood by normal thinking." Hector saw movement on the human ship's hull. Weapon ports were opening, but not the same ones that had fired before. These were different, larger, and the energy readings coming from them made his sensors scream warnings. "Please," he begged. "My crew has done nothing wrong. They were just following orders." "Following orders," Chen repeated. "That is what your people always say. Following orders when you burn our worlds. Following orders when you enslave other species. Following orders when you commit genocide. We can change. The hegemony can be different." Chen laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Your people have had 200 years to change. Instead, you have become worse. You have enslaved 6 new species since you destroyed humanity. You have burned 12 more worlds. You have proven that you will never change on your own." The weapon ports finished opening. The energy readings were now so high that Hector's sensors simply shut down to prevent damage. Whatever weapons the humans had built, they were beyond anything in Zephyrian understanding. "So we will change you," Chen said. "Whether you want to change or not, you cannot fight the entire hegemony with one ship." "Who said we only have one ship?" Hector felt his blood freeze. The idea of multiple ships like this one was terrifying beyond words. If the humans had a fleet of these reality-manipulating vessels, the hegemony was doomed. "How many ships do you have?" he whispered. "Enough to visit every hegemony world. Enough to stand over every military base. Enough to park above every government building. Your people will wake up one morning to find human ships in their skies, and they will know that their empire is over." "You would destroy billions of innocent people?" "Would we?" Chen asked. "Tell me, Admiral, how many innocent Zephyrians are there? How many of your people have never benefited from conquest? How many have never enjoyed the wealth built on slavery? How many have never supported the wars that destroyed entire species?" Hector could not answer. The truth was that most Zephyrians supported the Empire. They enjoyed the resources taken from conquered worlds. They took pride in their military victories. Even those who did not fight directly still benefited from the hegemony's power. "We spent 200 years thinking about justice," Chen said. "About what your people deserve for what they did to us and to others. We could simply destroy every Zephyrian world the way you destroyed ours. It would be easy now, but you won't. We are still human, Admiral. Despite everything that has happened to us, despite what we have become, we still remember what it means to be human. We believe in mercy even for our enemies." Hector felt hope for the first time since the battle began. "So you will spare us?" "We will give you a choice," Chen replied. "The same choice we offered your Admiral. Surrender and live. Fight and become extinct." "What kind of surrender?" "Complete. Total. Immediate. Every Zephyrian military vessel will be destroyed or turned over to the species you have enslaved. Every occupied world will be returned to its original owners. Every government leader will step down and face trial for war crimes." The terms were impossible. The hegemony would never agree to such demands. Their entire civilization was built on military power and conquest. Without those things, they would fall apart. "And if we refuse?" Chen's image smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Then we will show you what 200 years of evolution in the dark between galaxies can create. We will demonstrate why it was a mistake to drive humanity to the very edge of extinction, and then leave us alive." The human ship began to move away from the Crimson Blade. As it departed, it seemed to fade from view, becoming less real somehow. Within moments, it had vanished completely, leaving no trace that it had ever been there. "You have 1 standard year," Chen's voice said from empty space. "Tell your leaders what you saw here. Tell them what happened to the Third Fleet. Tell them that humanity has returned and we have not forgotten." The communication channel closed. Hector was alone with his crew in the silence of space, surrounded by the nothingness where 46 warships had once been. He would have to return home and explain the impossible. He would have to tell the hegemony that their greatest military victory had become their greatest nightmare. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity was waiting. 3 days later, Admiral Hector stood before the High Council of the Zephyrian hegemony in the great chamber on their capital world. His hand shook as he held the datapad containing his report. Around the circular room, 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at him with expressions of disbelief and anger. "You claim that 1 human ship destroyed the entire Third Fleet," said High Counselor Zethak, his voice heavy with doubt. 47 warships, including the Eternal Dominion, were completely eliminated in less than 5 minutes. "Yes, High Counselor. Hector replied. I have the sensor logs to prove it. Sensor logs can be faked, snapped Counselor Velmoth. This story is impossible. Humans are extinct. We made sure of that 2 centuries ago. The logs are real, Hector insisted. I saw it happen with my own eyes. The human ship used weapons we do not understand, technology that should not exist. High Counselor Zethek activated his personal display and reviewed the sensor, data from the Crimson Blade. His 4 eyes widened as he read the impossible energy readings and weapon signatures. That made no scientific sense. Even if this data is accurate, he said slowly, it could be explained by unknown alien technology. There is no proof these were actually humans. The captain identified herself, Hector said. She spoke our language perfectly. She knew our history. She mentioned the destruction of their homeworld specifically. 1 ship, Counselor Velmoth repeated. You want us to believe that 1 ship, no matter how advanced, could threaten the entire hegemony? She said they have more ships. She said they have enough to visit every world in our empire. The council chamber fell silent. The idea of multiple ships with such impossible capabilities was too frightening to consider seriously. The hegemony controlled thousands of worlds and commanded millions of warships. No enemy had ever posed a real threat to their power. What exactly did this human captain demand? Asked Counselor Havrex. Hector swallowed hard. Complete surrender. The destruction of our military forces. The return of all conquered worlds to their original owners. The trial of our government leaders for war crimes. Several counselors laughed at this. The demands were so outrageous they seemed like a joke. 1 ship, Velmoth said again, shaking his head. 1 ship demands the surrender of the greatest empire in galactic history. High Counselor, Hector said desperately, I recommend we take this threat seriously. What I saw was beyond anything in our understanding. If they have the ability to build more ships like the one I encountered. Admiral, Zethek interrupted, you have been through a traumatic experience. Losing an entire fleet would affect anyone's judgment. Perhaps you should take some time to recover before making strategic recommendations. I am not suffering from trauma, Hector shouted, his control finally breaking. I am trying to save our empire from destruction. The humans are not the same species we fought before. They have become something else. Something that can rewrite the laws of physics themselves. That is enough, Zethek said firmly. Admiral, you are relieved of duty pending a full investigation of this incident. Security will escort you to medical evaluation. 2 guards moved forward to take Hector away. As they reached for him, every light in the council chamber suddenly went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing the room in red light. Then a new voice spoke from the darkness. That will not be necessary. Captain Sarah Chen materialized in the center of the chamber. She had not entered through any door. She had not been transported by any known technology. She simply appeared, as if the universe had decided she belonged there. The guards reached for their weapons but found they could not move their arms. Their bodies had become frozen in place, held by invisible forces that felt gentle but completely unbreakable. High Counselor Zethek, Chen said politely, nodding to the leader of the hegemony. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. How did you get in here? Zethek demanded. This chamber is protected by the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. Your security systems work on the assumption that intruders follow normal physical laws, Chen replied. We do not. She walked slowly around the chamber, looking at each counselor in turn. They sat frozen in their chairs, not by any visible restraint, but by the absolute certainty that movement would be useless. Admiral Hector has given you an accurate report, Chen continued. I am disappointed that you chose not to believe him. It shows that your people have not learned wisdom from their losses. What do you want? Zethek asked. The same thing I wanted 3 days ago. The complete surrender of the Zephyrian hegemony, the return of all conquered territories, the release of all enslaved species, the trial of all war criminals. Impossible, Counselor Velmoth snarled. We will never surrender to humans. Chen turned to look at him. For a moment, her human appearance flickered, revealing something underneath that was far more than human. Velmoth screamed and pressed himself back in his chair. You misunderstand, Chen said calmly, her appearance returning to normal. I am not asking for your surrender. I am informing you that it has already happened. She gestured toward the chamber's main display screen. It activated, showing views from orbit around the capital world. In the black of space, shapes were becoming visible. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. The human fleet had arrived. Ships of impossible design hung in the void above the most heavily defended world in the hegemony. They varied in size and shape, but all shared the same quality of wrongness that made them hard to look at directly. They existed in dimensions that normal sensors could not properly detect. By now, similar fleets are appearing above every major world in your empire, Chen explained. Your military commanders are trying to respond, but they are finding that their ships will not start. Their weapons will not fire. Their communications are being blocked. How many ships do you have? Sethek whispered. Enough, Chen replied. We built them in the dark between galaxies far from any watching eyes. We had 200 years to prepare for this moment. We used that time well. On the display screen, they could see Zephyrian defense fleets trying to respond to the human arrival. Massive battleships attempted to move into position, but their engines simply would not function. Orbital weapons platforms tried to fire, but their targeting systems showed only error messages. Your technology was impressive once, Chen said, but it is based on an incomplete understanding of reality. Once you know how the universe really works, your weapons become as harmless as toys. What happens now? Sethek asked. Now you learn what it means to be conquered, Chen replied. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your government will be dissolved. The species you have enslaved will be freed. The worlds you have stolen will be returned. And us? What happens to the Zephyrian people? Chen considered this question for a long moment. That depends on how you behave. If you accept the new reality peacefully, you will be allowed to live. Your people will be given a single world to call home. You will be restricted to that world until you prove you can coexist peacefully with others. One world? Velmoth gasped. Our empire spans thousands of systems. Your empire is over, Chen said simply. It ended the moment you chose to ignore Admiral Hector's warning. She walked back to the center of the chamber and faced the High Counselor directly. You have a choice to make, Zethek. You can order your people to surrender peacefully, or you can fight a war you cannot possibly win. If you choose to fight, we will be forced to use methods that are less gentle. What kind of methods? Chen's expression darkened. The same methods we used on your third fleet, but on a larger scale. We could erase your species from existence as easily as we erased those 47 ships. We could make it so that Zephyrians had never existed at all. The threat hung in the air like a poison cloud. The counselors sat in stunned silence, trying to process the reality of their situation. The greatest empire in galactic history had been brought to its knees by the same species they thought they had destroyed centuries ago. I need time to consider, Sethek said weakly. You have 1 hour, Chen replied. After that we will assume you have chosen war. She began to fade from view, becoming transparent like a ghost. Remember, High Counselor, we offered you mercy. We could have simply destroyed you all without warning. The fact that you are still alive to make this choice is proof that we have not forgotten our humanity. Even after what we did to you? Chen paused in her departure. Especially because of what you did to us. You see, High Counselor, that is the difference between humans and Zephyrians. When you had power, you used it to destroy. When we have power, we use it to build something better. She vanished completely, leaving the counselors alone with their impossible choice. Outside, the human fleet waited in patient silence, ready to bring an empire to its knees or wipe it from existence entirely. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun again.